Welcome back to our channel. It's not just a penny, it's a hidden treasure. These rare wheat pennies are insanely valuable. In 1939, amidst the echoes of a recovering depression and the murmurs of impending war in Europe, the U.S. Mint continued its routine production of coinage that kept the economy in motion. 1-cent pieces, struck with Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile and the now iconic wheat ears on the reverse, were minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each coin, in its own right, served its purpose in daily trade, passing unnoticed from hand to hand, echoing the pulse of everyday America. At first glance, 1939 seemed to offer no remarkable anomaly in the world of coinage, at least not one openly acknowledged or immediately celebrated. As millions of these wheat pennies emerged from the dies, pressed between steel and copper, their consistency was unremarkable. The planchets used were standard bronze, 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc, and the design had been in place since 1909, commemorating the centennial of Lincoln's birth. By 1939, the wheat penny had become so familiar that few paused to consider each year's batch as unique. Yet somewhere between the vibration of dies and the feeding of blank planchets into the press, an error occurred. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grotesque. It was subtle enough to pass unnoticed for decades. Decades later, an unassuming collector named Thomas Ridley, based in Oregon, pored over a modest acquisition of wheat pennies he had sourced from a local estate sale. Ridley, a retired postal worker with a patient eye and an old-school magnifying loupe, was no stranger to sorting through boxes of forgotten coins. He often described it as looking for echoes, traces of the past calling from an ordinary object. That particular evening in early autumn, the sun dipped low as he sifted through rolls, the coins tumbling gently onto velvet. It was then that he paused on a particular penny from 1939. Something felt off. At first, it was the texture of the surface, a slight warping, almost imperceptible, that interrupted the otherwise even patina. He turned it over, examining Lincoln's profile. Nothing amiss. But when he brought the magnifier to the wheat ears, his heart skipped. The left wheat stalk appeared unusually faint, as though partially melted into the background. The D in E pluribus unum was oddly malformed, stretching into the rim. His breath caught as he noticed the doubling on the date, subtle, not dramatic like the famous 1955 doubling, but enough to trigger his instincts. He set the coin aside, blinking in disbelief. Could this be a case of die deterioration? Or something rarer? The uncertainty was a thrill that he didn't sleep that night. Instead, he cross-referenced his findings with every known error registry he could access. Hours passed. The closest resemblance was a minor listing on a seldom updated archive, citing a potential misaligned die strike with partial doubling on a 1939 D cent, but with no image and only hearsay to accompany it. Ridley's coin bore no mintmark, Philadelphia issue. Could it be entirely undocumented? The thought both excited and unsettled him. The more he stared at it, the more he recognized inconsistencies in the planchet composition itself. The surface shimmered differently, lacking the usual depth of bronze, as though the coin had been struck on an off-metal blank. He sent the coin for professional grading and authentication, heart thudding each time the mail truck passed his window. Weeks later, the letter arrived. Not just an error, but a highly unusual one. The report cited a multifaceted anomaly, partial collar strike, planchet variance, and minor doubling consistent with hub die issues. The grader noted that the coin appeared to have been struck on a foreign planchet, potentially one destined for a non-US denomination of similar size. That twist deepened the mystery. How had such a coin entered the production line unnoticed? And why 1939, of all years? The collector's world is not often shaken, but whispers began to circulate. Forums lit up. 1939 wheat penny on foreign planchet, they asked. Skepticism clashed with excitement. Photographs of the coin stirred speculation. A few dismissed it as environmental damage, others, however, drew comparisons with known mint errors of similar nature, such as 1943 coppers and off-metal Roosevelt dimes. What stood out in Ridley's coin was its convergence of anomalies, none severe on their own, but together forming a portrait of quiet chaos in the minting process. A coin shows, Ridley carried it in a modest velvet case, showing it to trusted eyes. Each viewer reacted differently, some curious, some dismissive, and a few visibly startled. One dealer from Pennsylvania examined the coin under halogen light and muttered, "This shouldn't exist." Ridley didn't care for dramatics, but even he felt the pull of something bigger than a mere mistake. He began to track the coin's value informally, noting the offers he received. First it was $3,000, then $8,000, then a staggering $20,200 from a collector who specialized in off-metal mint errors. But Ridley declined. Not yet. He needed answers. He traced correspondence from retired mint employees, scanning for any mention of production anomalies in 1939. One former technician recalled an issue with planchet sourcing during that era, due to metal reallocation efforts. Another hinted at foreign blanks being stored nearby in preparation for future collaborative minting agreements. These stories weren't conclusive, but they painted a plausible background for how the error might have occurred. One theory suggested a blank intended for a Mexican 5-centavo coin found its way into the Lincoln cent batch. Unlikely, but not impossible. The coin's market appeal began to evolve. Collectors, always drawn to rarity and story, started speculating on the number of such errors that could exist. But the deeper they looked, the fewer leads emerged. The uniqueness of Ridley's coin became part of its appeal. A dealer in Ohio called it the ghost cent, referring to its spectral appearance and the murky story behind its existence. Articles surfaced in numismatic magazines, each carefully avoiding bold claims, but hinting at anomalous characteristics worth further study. No one wanted to state its value outright. The coin resisted classification. Ridley held onto it as the offers grew. By 2015, whispers placed its worth in the mid-five-figure range. An auction house from New York contacted him, offering an exclusive slot in their rare coin catalog. He declined again. The coin wasn't just an object to him, it had become a question, an unanswered one. He had learned to listen to the silence between expert opinions. Everyone saw the surface. Few understood the story beneath. It wasn't until a specialist in metallurgical anomalies from Minnesota examined the coin under electron microscopy that the narrative took another sharp turn. Microscopic analysis revealed not just a different metallic composition than typical bronze but signs of improper annealing. The coin had been struck on a planchet that had not undergone proper heat treatment, a rare but not unheard of situation, especially during years with production pressures or equipment maintenance lapses. More surprising, however, was the identification of trace elements of nickel and chromium, ingredients more consistent with foreign coinage or experimental blanks. What began as a simple coin roll hunt had now turned into a minor numismatic legend. The coin's classification was updated: 1939 Lincoln cent, struck on improper foreign planchet, with partial double die obverse and collar misalignment. Each term adding a layer to its complexity, each anomaly elevating its intrigue. When Ridley finally agreed to a private valuation, he did so not for the money but to satisfy a decade-long curiosity. The final appraisal stunned even the most optimistic observers. The coin was valued between $78,000 and $110,000, depending on auction conditions. A figure that turned heads, not because of the number alone, but because of the quiet way the coin had ascended from anonymity to high desirability. Not with the fanfare of a 1909 SVDB or a 1955 double die, but with a whisper that grew into thunder, and then came the twist. A second coin surfaced. In the spring of 2022, a small-town collector in Illinois submitted a 1939 cent to a regional grading service, noting faint doubling and strange coloration. The report confirmed similar alloy anomalies, similar strike misalignment, and once again, the faint erosion of the left wheat ear. When news reached Ridley, he traveled to see it himself. He held it, stared at it, and felt the same shiver. This wasn't a one-off. The discovery of a second coin rewrote the story. It suggested a batch. A moment in minting history when something went unnoticed, not once, but at least twice. And if twice, perhaps more. Ridley's coin was no longer an island but part of a hidden archipelago. The value did not diminish, in fact, it increased. Provenance and pattern gave the coin deeper meaning. Collectors speculated anew. How many were out there? How many lay dormant in jars, rolls, attics? The market adjusted. Auctioneers added a premium for documented companion anomalies. Ridley's coin, now officially dubbed the Ridley Ghost Cent, entered the American Numismatic Hall of Error fame, not for its dramatic flaw, but for the quiet confluence of events that brought it into being, kept it hidden, and then revealed it through patience and persistence. To this day, no one can say exactly how or why the error occurred. But those who've held the Ridley Ghost Cent speak of a feeling, an echo of something rare, improbable, and beautifully flawed. And they continue to search, not just for the coin itself, but for the moment, the mystery, and the possibility that something extraordinary still hides in the most ordinary of places. In 1946, the United States stood on the edge of recovery and renewal. World War II had ended the year prior, and across the nation, soldiers returned home, factories shifted from wartime production to consumer goods, and the public felt the first stirrings of post-war prosperity. Yet even in this era of transition, the U.S. Mint continued its relentless rhythm, pressing coins that would fuel the growing economy. Among them, the humble 1-cent wheat penny, a coin so ordinary in its function that few could imagine it might carry a secret of immense rarity. And yet, from this period of history came a cent unlike the others, one whose unusual fate would not be discovered for many decades. The 1946 Lincoln wheat penny was minted in large numbers, with facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco producing millions of examples. The war had ended, but the ripples of wartime metal shortages and minting adjustments still lingered. Copper, previously rationed for shell casings, had returned to use in cent production, replacing the zinc-coated steel composition of 1943. In theory, 1946 coins should have been straightforward, bronze planchets, standard dies, no experimental materials. But somewhere within the thousands of pounds of copper planchets, something slipped through the cracks. The error was not announced. No headlines declared its presence. It did not disrupt commerce or halt the presses. It simply existed, quietly, unnoticed, waiting for a curious eye to catch what others had overlooked. And for many years, it passed through the fingers of cashiers, children, and clerks, never raising suspicion, that is, until a collector named Joseph Landry from Vermont happened upon a curious coin while inspecting a batch purchased from an antique dealer's coin bin. He was a quiet man, known for his patient, methodical nature. His collection wasn't vast, but it was chosen with care. One foggy afternoon, as he pored over coins near a window lit with the soft light of a late autumn day, his attention caught on a 1946 cent. Something about the rim looked uneven, worn in a way that defied natural circulation. That he picked it up and rotated it slowly. Lincoln's face was intact, the fields clean, the wheat stalks crisp, yet the spacing on the reverse lettering seemed off. The 1 cent appeared slightly misaligned, subtly distorted. And when he flipped it again, the date, 1946, seemed to shimmer under magnification, revealing traces of doubling in the numerals. It wasn't the dramatic doubling known from 1955, but a more understated ripple that hinted at a mechanical flaw during minting. Joseph's pulse quickened. He examined the edges and noticed something stranger still. The edge was faintly curved, as though the coin had been partially struck outside the collar that holds the blank in place during minting. His breath caught. This wasn't just a common wheat penny. This was something different. Something that needed further investigation. That he sent the coin to a reputable grading service, not expecting much, perhaps hoping for confirmation of a minor error. But the report that returned weeks later shocked him. The coin had not only been struck with a misaligned die and slight doubling, it had been minted on a leftover planchet from a foreign coin. The analysis revealed trace elements inconsistent with post-war bronze, including higher-than-expected levels of nickel and even minute traces of silver, suggesting the blank was originally meant for another denomination entirely, possibly a foreign coin or an experimental issue from wartime production. The implications were staggering. Somehow, in 1946, a blank meant for another use had been fed into the press, struck with the standard Lincoln cent dies, and released into circulation. And no one had caught it. No record in mint logs. No warning issued. Just one coin, and possibly more, that defied expectations and slid silently into the public's pocket. The numismatic community buzzed with speculation. Was it a leftover planchet from an Allied coin program? A misplaced blank from the 1944 experimental runs? Could there be more of them? Theories abounded, but none had definitive proof. What was clear, however, was the coin's rarity. Only a single documented example of this exact composition with these error types, partial collar strike, minor doubling, and off-metal planchet, had been verified. Joseph's coin became known in collecting circles as the 1946 Phantom Cent, a name that reflected its ghostly appearance and the mystery surrounding its origin. Experts debated the likelihood of additional specimens existing, but no identical example emerged. Auction houses took notice. Private offers began trickling in, first a modest $10,500, then $14,000. But Joseph, like many collectors before him, was driven more by the enigma than the profit. Years passed. The coin's fame grew. Articles were written. Digital scans circulated in forums. Some claimed to have seen similar examples in the wild, though none matched the exact alloy signature or die pattern. The coin became not just rare, but singular. And with singularity came value. In 2009, the coin was quietly appraised by a trio of dealers specializing in rare U.S. errors. They examined it under high-resolution imaging, spectrographic analysis, and historical cross-referencing with mint logs and metal shipment records. What they concluded was nothing short of stunning. The coin was likely struck on a foreign planchet never meant for use in the U.S., possibly smuggled into production during the chaotic post-war adjustments. There was no documentation of such a planchet being used, and the die pairing was confirmed to be one of the earliest used in 1946 Philadelphia production, suggesting the error occurred during an early production run. The appraisal placed the coin's value between $38,000 and $62,000 at the time, a number that made waves in the error collecting community. Some whispered that Joseph should have accepted the offer. Others praised his resolve in keeping it until the full story unraveled, but the story didn't end there. In 2021, a private museum in Pennsylvania hosted an exhibit on Great Mistakes of American Coinage. Joseph was contacted and asked to lend his 1946 cent for display. He agreed, and the coin was showcased alongside the legendary 1943 copper cent, the 1955 double die, and the 2000 mule Sacagawea dollar. Visitors marveled at its understated appearance and layered history. Among them was a metallurgist from a Canadian university who noticed something even the original graders had missed. Microscopic imaging revealed evidence of repunched lettering on the reverse, specifically the United States of America text, which showed doubling inconsistent with simple die deterioration. This suggested the reverse die itself may have been improperly prepared or re-engraved, making it a multi-error coin with yet another unique attribute. The finding elevated the coin's rarity even further. Suddenly, its market value was not just tied to its off-metal composition or collar misalignment, but also to this newly discovered die anomaly. 3 significant errors, all in a single coin, minted at a time when such mistakes were becoming increasingly rare. At a private valuation event held later that year, 3 high-end collectors vied quietly to secure the coin. The final unofficial valuation estimate ranged between $62,000 and $134,000, depending on the terms of sale and future public auction results. Joseph declined once again to sell. For him, the coin was a symbol of discovery, patience, and the quiet thrill of unearthing history buried beneath the mundane. To this day, the 1946 Phantom Cent remains an anomaly wrapped in mystery. No definitive explanation has been agreed upon. The mint never acknowledged the error. And despite years of searching, no other specimen with the same characteristics has been found. Collectors still whisper of jars and drawers and attic finds, wondering if another hides in plain sight. But only Joseph's coin has told its story in full, rising from a forgotten bin to a place of honor, a reminder that even in the most ordinary year, with the most common coin, the extraordinary might lie waiting. And when it does, its value goes beyond copper and nickel. It carries history, curiosity, and the quiet wonder of a mistake that should never have existed at all. In 1952, the world was adjusting to a new kind of tension. The Second World War had faded into memory, replaced by the slow-burning unease of the Cold War. Television sets buzzed in American living rooms. Eisenhower was weeks away from being elected president, and the country was confidently striding into a future marked by booming industry and emerging technology. The U.S. Mint, undeterred by geopolitical tension or economic cycles, pressed forward in its constant mission of supplying coinage to a rapidly expanding population. Among the routine production of that year was the familiar Lincoln wheat penny, bronze, compact, and unremarkable in its everyday function. But within those unassuming mintage numbers, a mistake occurred. One that remained concealed for years until fate placed it in the hands of someone curious enough to notice what others had overlooked. The 1952 wheat penny had a fairly conventional mintage. Struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, billions of these 1-cent coins were pressed using 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc alloy. There was nothing outwardly experimental about that year's coinage, and the wheat reverse had been used since 1909 with minor design adjustments along the way. The dies had been refined over decades, and the machinery was operating at peak efficiency. Or so it seemed. There was no announcement. No alert from the mint. No entry in production records that indicated a deviation. But deviations don't always announce themselves. Sometimes, they simply wait, hidden in circulation, quietly biding their time until a collector with enough patience and luck brings their story into the light. That moment arrived nearly half a century later when Elena McBride, a school librarian and weekend coin enthusiast from Missouri, was browsing through a modest stack of wheat pennies acquired from a local garage sale. The coins had been kept in a rusted tobacco tin, mixed with old buttons, costume jewelry, and a few marbles. She didn't expect much, perhaps a 1909 VDB if she was lucky, maybe a steel cent from 43. But as she laid out the coins in neat rows by year and mint mark, one piece caught her attention. The penny was dated 1952 and bore no mint mark, indicating Philadelphia. At first glance, it appeared worn, but a second look under her loupe revealed inconsistencies. The 5 in the date was misshapen, with doubling that stretched the curve upward ever so slightly. She turned the coin to the reverse side, and her brow furrowed. The wheat ears weren't symmetrical, one was sharply defined, while the other seemed faint, as if fading into the surface. And stranger still, the rim on the reverse was thinner on one side, with the letters, United States of America, crowding unnaturally toward the edge. Elena had handled hundreds of wheat cents in her life, but this one made her pause. There was something unnatural about it, not dramatic, not screaming for attention, but unsettling in its quiet irregularity. She placed it in a protective sleeve and began researching. The more she investigated, the deeper the mystery became. Professional graders confirmed her suspicions. The penny had multiple characteristics inconsistent with standard 1952 Philadelphia production. First, the doubling on the obverse date suggested a die clash or hub misalignment during the creation of the dies. Second, the faint wheat ear and uneven rim pointed to a misaligned collar during the striking process. And third, most surprising of all, the coin's metal content was anomalous. Lab analysis revealed the presence of higher nickel content than standard bronze, along with trace elements of manganese. This suggested that the planchet may have been sourced incorrectly, possibly a leftover blank intended for a wartime experimental token or foreign coinage. This finding opened the door to a theory. In the post-war era, as the mint shifted resources and materials, some blanks not meant for circulation coins may have been mixed into regular batches. Elena's discovery was no longer just an unusual penny. It was a coin with an undocumented past, a fingerprint of human error at the junction of process, metal, and time. She began receiving inquiries, some polite, others more urgent. Local dealers asked to see the coin. Online collectors requested images. And then came the offers, first modest, then startling. $6,000. $10,200. Then one dealer offered $4,700 after viewing high-resolution images. But Elena, ever the archivist, refused. She wanted to understand before she parted with it. Her coin, nicknamed by others as the Ghost Rim Cent, began gaining traction in numismatic circles. It was presented at a regional coin expo under a special exhibit for unsolved U.S. Mint anomalies. Experts debated its origin. One theory proposed that it had been struck on a foreign planchet originally intended for Latin American coinage minted in the U.S. Another posited it had been a leftover from wartime experiments, as similar blanks had been used in testing alternative metals during the early 1940s. But what made Elena's penny so compelling wasn't just the planchet or the doubling. It was the convergence of these elements: the minor obverse doubling, the off-center collar strike, the metal discrepancy, and the faint wheat ear, all converging on a single specimen from a year not known for major minting errors. It was a perfect storm, subtle in its damage but profound in its implications. Collectors who had previously overlooked 1952 as a quiet year in penny production now began combing through their own collections. A few claimed to have similar coins, though none matched all of the error features found in Elena's piece. One had minor doubling. Another had rim distortion. But none had the same unusual alloy signature. Her coin remained unique. And with uniqueness came rising value. By 2017, the offers had grown bolder. A private collector from California, known for assembling error coin sets based on historical anomalies, offered her $28,000. Later that year, a European bidder reportedly contacted a dealer on her behalf with a standing offer exceeding $40,000. Elena still hesitated. The coin had become more than just a find, it was a mystery, a question yet to be answered fully. She continued consulting metallurgists, researchers, and former mint employees. The more she learned, the more she felt drawn to the story behind the coin, and then, in 2023, a dramatic twist unfolded. A second penny surfaced, submitted anonymously to a major grading company. Also dated 1952. Also from Philadelphia. And while the rim was clean and the doubling absent, spectroscopic analysis revealed a nearly identical alloy composition to Elena's coin: higher nickel, trace manganese, and faint silver content. It lacked the collar misalignment and design flaws, but the metal composition was an exact match. This discovery confirmed a new possibility: a small batch of off-metal planchets had entered the 1952 production line unnoticed. The numismatic world took notice. What had once been a one-off mistake was now part of a rare and previously undocumented anomaly. The possibility of more coins existing, not identical in every error, but part of the same mysterious batch, turned Elena's coin from a standalone curiosity into the centerpiece of a larger puzzle. Auction houses began preparing for the day she might choose to part with it. Estimates were updated. Based on market trends, the convergence of multiple errors, the uniqueness of the full error combination, and the emergence of a sibling coin, the value range was revised. Experts now placed the ghost rim cent's potential auction price between $55,000 and $126,000, depending on timing, market interest, and bidding dynamics. Still, Elena waited. She kept the coin in a fireproof safe, sometimes removing it to examine it under fresh light, as if trying to hear the story it still hadn't fully told. It remained a secret she shared with only a few, a whisper from 1952, struck in bronze and wrapped in uncertainty. The value was not just in the metal or rarity. It was in the mystery, the discovery, and the realization that even the most ordinary object can carry an extraordinary story, if you know how to look. And for those who collect not just coins, but questions, the 1952 ghost rim cent remains one of the most quietly powerful discoveries in American numismatic history. In 1958, the United States was standing at a cultural crossroads. Elvis Presley topped the charts, NASA had just been established, and Americans were dreaming of space while still grounded in the simplicity of post-war life. The economy was growing, families were settling into suburban homes, and across the country, pocket change quietly moved through daily routines, rarely noticed, rarely questioned. Among that pocket change was the 1958 Lincoln wheat penny. It was a familiar coin, bearing the same face it had since 1909 and the same pair of wheat stalks on the reverse. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet that year, at the very end of the wheat penny's official run, something happened. Something rare. Something the mint never acknowledged, and few people even imagined could exist. The wheat reverse was about to be replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959, to honor the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. In anticipation, the mint ramped up its 1958 production, with over 250 million pennies struck in Philadelphia and more than 800 million in Denver. It was supposed to be a final, routine send-off to an iconic design. But the end of one era, as it turns out, brought with it one last mistake: that it wasn't discovered right away. For decades, the 1958 wheat penny was viewed as common, ubiquitous, even. Collectors didn't give it much attention, and it sat in countless jars, drawers, and bank rolls without fanfare. That changed one rainy afternoon in 1999, when a quiet collector named Carl Henderson from Spokane, Washington, was thumbing through a box of old coins his grandfather had passed down to him. Carl wasn't a full-time numismatist, just a man with an appreciation for history and a passion for detail that he had sorted the pennies by decade, then by mintmark. The 1958s were grouped together in one neat row, identical at first glance. But one caught his eye. Not for its color or wear, but for its reverse design. The lettering on United States of America looked faint, almost fading. The wheat stalks, too, seemed less defined on the right than on the left. And when he turned it to the obverse, something unusual stood out immediately. There was a faint doubling on the words, "In God We Trust," and again on the word, "Liberty." Not a dramatic doubling, nothing that screamed for attention, but subtle, like a shadow behind the letters. He pulled out a magnifying glass and examined the date. The number 8 in 1958 seemed to have a soft echo beneath it. Carl felt a wave of excitement rise in his chest. He had read about the famous 1955 double-die cent. Could this be another? He mailed the coin to a grading service with a letter describing his observations, not expecting much. A month later, the coin returned with a label that changed everything. It was authenticated as a genuine 1958 double-die obverse, with additional reverse weakness due to a misaligned die strike. This combination, obverse doubling with reverse striking issues, wasn't just rare. It was nearly unheard of for 1958. Word spread quickly. Collectors and dealers had long assumed that no major double-die errors were struck that year. The most well-known double-dies had occurred in 1955 and 1972, with only minor varieties in between. But this coin changed the narrative. It wasn't just a minting curiosity, it was a challenge to what numismatists thought they knew. Carl's coin became the subject of intense interest. Professional experts traced its characteristics to early Philadelphia mint activity in 1958, identifying a possible die pair that had briefly malfunctioned during a limited production run. The error was subtle, but unmistakable. The obverse had doubling most prominent on Liberty and the date, while the reverse showed signs of deterioration and improper alignment. Soon, whispers emerged of other examples surfacing, though they were few and scattered. Only 3 more coins were authenticated with the same doubling pattern and reverse irregularity. Each had minor differences in condition, but the errors lined up enough to suggest a very short-lived die pairing used briefly and then corrected. The mint never confirmed its existence. There were no records, no official explanations. But the coins were real. And they were no longer ignored. Carl, initially overwhelmed by the attention, found himself fielding offers from dealers across the country. One collector offered $9,000, another $15,000. He politely declined each one. His curiosity now rivaled his attachment. He wanted to know more. He attended coin shows, gave interviews to small numismatic newsletters, and even allowed his coin to be scanned for forensic imaging. Researchers found microscopic abrasions consistent with older-style die maintenance, leading to speculation that the die used in this era may have been reused beyond its intended lifespan, possibly due to a temporary shortage in replacement dies as the mint prepared for the upcoming design change. By 2007, the known population of 1958 double-die cents remained tiny, just 4 confirmed examples. The numismatic world regarded them with a mixture of awe and frustration. If more existed, they were hidden in plain sight, perhaps still tucked into penny albums or rolling around in forgotten change drawers. Then came a twist no one expected. A 5th coin surfaced at a flea market in Iowa in 2014. It was raw, ungraded, and in a worn condition, but it matched the known doubling pattern almost perfectly. Its condition was too poor for resale value to match Carl's pristine specimen, but its discovery confirmed that the die pair had been used for slightly longer than previously thought. The find reignited interest, and collectors began hunting 1958 pennies again with renewed energy, yet even with this resurgence, no more high-grade examples emerged. Carl's original find remained the finest known example, and the centerpiece of a very small set of known coins. The coin's unique set of characteristics, obverse doubling, reverse strike weakness, and a narrowed collar rim, formed a trio of features that no other example had in such clean combination. Auction houses now watched the coin closely. In 2021, a private collector from New York submitted a six-figure offer in a confidential setting. Carl declined. His coin wasn't just valuable, it was history made tangible, an anomaly from a year where none was expected, a mistake at the final moment of a design's life. In 2023, it was featured in a digital exhibit highlighting America's most surprising numismatic finds. Viewers were shocked to learn that even a simple 1958 penny could conceal such depth, such mystery. The wheat reverse, about to be retired forever, had offered one last surprise, quietly, without announcement, and with no immediate consequence. And yet, decades later, it transformed the understanding of an entire year's production. Today, the 1958 double-die obverse wheat penny with reverse misalignment remains one of the rarest and most captivating U.S. cent errors in existence. While it may not have the celebrity status of the 1955 double-die, or the drama of the 1943 copper cent, its quiet rarity and layered errors have made it a legend among insiders. Only a handful are known, and Carl's coin is still regarded as the highest quality example of the group. As of its latest valuation, based on condition, provenance, and the enduring mystery surrounding its minting, the coin's value is estimated to fall between $50,000 and $110,000. And yet, for Carl, its worth remains tied not only to price, but to the moment he discovered it, hidden in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone to see what no one else had.